Do you complain when the internet is slow? Do you get annoyed by traffic? Well, get ready to find out what it was like to live a whole day in the Middle Ages, where a single banana could be the difference between life and death. Spoiler, you wouldn't even last until lunch.
The Middle Ages, the period between the fall of the Roman Empire and the Renaissance. Castles, knights, kings and queens. Sounds glamorous, doesn't it? Well, forget everything you've seen in the movies. Medieval reality was more like a survival reality show, where bananas were rarer than diamonds and more valuable than gold.
Let's start with the basics. You wake up in a medieval village in the year 1348. You're an ordinary peasant, not a nobleman, swimming in bananas. You have the equivalent of, let's say, 1 banana to get you through the day. Does that sound like a small amount? That's because it is a small amount. In fact, it's far too generous.
First thing you do when you woke up? Probably go to the bathroom? Oh, how innocent. In the Middle Ages, using the bathroom was a rustic experience. There was no plumbing, no toilet paper. You would relieve yourself in a hole in the ground or in a chamber pot that was emptied in the street. If you were lucky enough to have a banana, you could use the peel. But wasting a banana like that, you'd have to be completely insane.
Bathing? Oh yes, bathing. People bathed once a month if they were lucky. Water was scarce and heating it was a luxury. It was like human soup seasoned with, well, you don't want to know. The price of admission? A banana. Literally. So you had to choose, stink or spend a precious banana to contaminate yourself in questionable waters. And what about diseases? The Black Death, smallpox, leprosy? The Middle Ages were a festival of disease. There was no modern medicine, no vaccines. If you got sick, the solution was to pray and hope for the best, or the worst. And if you had a banana, maybe you could trade it for a potion from a quack healer. Spoiler, it didn't work. Now let's talk about food. You're obviously hungry because your one morning banana has already been used up in the public restroom and a failed attempt to shower. What should you eat? If you are a nobleman, and remember, you are not, you could eat white bread, meat, wine, spices. But you are a common peasant, so your diet consisted basically of hard rye bread, oatmeal porridge, and, if you were lucky, some vegetables. Delicious, isn't it? Oh, and what about bananas? Forget it. Bananas were an exotic luxury that came from faraway lands. Seeing a real banana was like winning the lottery. Most people died without ever having tasted one. So when I say you had a banana for the day, I'm being metaphorical. In fact, you had a coin that was worth a banana, if bananas were even available on the market. And the water? Oh, the water. Most people drank water from rivers and wells, which were often contaminated. There was no basic sanitation. Every sip was a small dose of poison. The medieval people didn't know this, of course, but you do. So what do you choose? Die of thirst or die slowly from poisoning? Decisions. Now you need to work. After all, that banana currency doesn't come by itself. But what kind of job could you get in the Middle Ages? If you were lucky, you could work in agriculture, carrying giant rocks under the blazing sun with no safety equipment for a fraction of a banana a day. Literally, your daily wage was barely enough to buy a loaf of stale bread. Or maybe you worked as a serf. You weren't a slave, but you weren't free either. You belonged to the land, and the land belonged to your master. You worked for him, paid him taxes, and couldn't leave without his permission. And the pay? Half a banana a week, if you lived to get it. But wait, it gets worse. Because in the Middle Ages, you weren't just a worker. You were a subject. And subjects had obligations, like serving in your lord's army. No notice, no choice. One day you're carrying stones for banana crumbs. The next, you're marching to war to fight enemies who want to rip your head off. Speaking of violence, let's talk about public safety in the Middle Ages. Or rather, the lack of it. The Middle Ages were a time of constant warfare. Feudal lords fought each other, kingdoms clashed, and invaders plundered villages. The streets were controlled by bandits. Muggings were as common as pigeons. And what about justice? Well, if you were noble enough to own a banana orchard, you might be able to buy a fair trial. But you're not noble. You have your banana currency, remember? So if someone stole it from you, you just died. There was no social security, no government assistance, no bananas, no life. It was that simple. And don't forget the bonfires. Oh, you think the Inquisition was just for witches? Anyone who questioned the church or was considered a heretic could end up at the stake. And you know what the prize for the inquisitor was? A laurel wreath and a banana. One banana for burning people alive. But let's assume you've survived this far. Congratulations. You're tougher than 90% of the medieval population. But the day isn't over yet. Because now it is night. And in the Middle Ages, night belonged to the dead. Literally. It was when bodies were collected from the streets, when criminals came out of hiding, when disease spread most quickly. You go home, if you can call that hole a home, a one-room shack, no heat, no glass windows, just you, the cold, the hunger, and the certainty that tomorrow would be even worse. Oh, and I forgot to mention, you haven't eaten anything all day. Remember your banana coin? You spent it in the public restroom, or it was stolen by a thief. So you go to bed hungry, cold, and with the prospect of waking up tomorrow to do it all over again. And that's how your first, and probably last, day in the Middle Ages ends. You didn't die, which is already a victory, but you also didn't live in the sense we understand it today. The truth is that life in the Middle Ages was brutally difficult for 99% of the population. While a small elite swam in metaphorical bananas, the vast majority struggled daily just to survive. There was no romance, there was no glamour, there was only the constant struggle against hunger, disease, violence, and death. So the next time you complain about traffic, slow internet, or the price of bananas at the supermarket, remember, you are living better than medieval kings. You have access to clean water, abundant food, modern medicine, and yes, fresh bananas whenever you want them. So, do you think you would last the day in the Middle Ages? Let us know in the comments which part of medieval life you think would be the hardest to endure. And if you have suggestions for other historical periods we should explore with bananas, let us know. If you liked this video, leave a like. It's worth more than a medieval banana. Subscribe to the channel for more peeled stories and activate the bell so you don't miss any episodes. Share it with that friend who complains about everything so he can see how difficult life could really be. Always remember, history is made of bananas, and you are just a husk in the wind of time. But at least you are a husk with Netflix and food delivery. See you next episode of Banana Stories, where we'll find out why you wouldn't last a day as a gladiator. Spoiler, it involves even fewer bananas and a lot more suffering. Keep your bananas safe and remember, history has never been so peeled.